Well, thank you for the invitation, and you saw, some of you may have seen us haul in a whole bunch of boxes for this demonstration, and I'm sure you got frightened by all of the accoutrements, but in fact, this is what you need to do hide glue. You need a hammer, you need a jar and a glue, a veneer saw if you're so inclined, or a knife, a chisel, and that's it. This is seriously low-tech stuff. It's been around for a long time. Its results last a long time, and pretty much everything that you need to do hide glue, except I guess the veneer saw, you're kind of making your shop. There's no real reason to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. You need a pot to make stuff warm in, but I'm sure you can find a pot. Anyway, can I get the first slide? So when you start talking to people about hide glue, they say, oh, really? Come on, all right? Already it's 2020, whatever it is, 5. People don't use this stuff anymore. There's better stuff out there. And, they're convinced I'm going to start persuading people that pit sawing is the way to go for cutting up their... So, next. But the fact is, why would you bother with this stuff? I mean, it is obviously not as easy to use as PVA glue. It's got a little bit of overhead associated with it. But hide glue can do anything that PVA glue can do except destroy the finish. So if you're trying to destroy your finish, this is not the glue that you want to pick. The issue with it is hot hide glue has a very short open time, so for some applications that can be a serious problem. It has its own niche, and because of that issue of it sets up real fast, and one other property actually make it useful for certain applications that PVA glue just really doesn't scratch that itch at all. If you go to liquid hide glue, which is basically hot hide glue that you threw something else into to make the gel point go away, it can do everything that PVA glue can do except destroy the finish. So there's a theme here that if you're really into keeping your finish intact, you probably want to think about hide glue, and if you don't want to get into the heating stuff up, give a thought to liquid hide glue. Just instead of the PVA glue, because there's no real compelling reason. Now, what got me started on this was I was really fascinated when you go to museums and you look at 18th and 19th century furniture, and I was fascinated by how did these guys do this stuff with such simple tools. I mean, whenever you look at somebody today, they're breaking out their router jigs and the routers and table saws and band saws, and these guys basically worked with a variety of hand planes, chisels, hand saws, and they produced this, and lathes, and produced this really wonderful stuff. So my interest wasn't in building furniture at the time. I was more interested in figuring out how did these people do this stuff. And when that happened, I wound up going down several rabbit holes. The whole thing about hand planes, how they're put together, where they're appropriate, how you actually use them, shooting boards, shop-made jigs for stringing and inlay and veneering, and hide glue. So each one of those was a rabbit hole in and of itself that really took quite a while, and the way I learned it was I would read a lot of very old woodworking books, history books. Some of them hard to read the language because they were in very kind of 18th century with the F really was a double S, and but the nice thing about them was they didn't have, there weren't a lot of color glossy pictures with a photograph on the back of each one explaining what each one was. There's just words. And if you're really into words and you want to see how did this guy actually do this stuff, instead of imagining how he did it from the picture, you read the old books. Okay, so I went down, this is the story of my hide glue rabbit hole. And I'm going to try to get through geeky stuff real fast because I really want to spend more time on demonstrations on some of what these niches are that you want to give some thought to. So when I started, I had all these questions, and it really was puzzling. Like, where do you buy this stuff? Do I have to kill a badger so I can make a glue brush? Why doesn't a veneer hammer look like a hammer? I mean, there's just, how do you keep this stuff, if you really need an open time more than a minute or two, can you really do that with this stuff? So anyway, the overriding thing was, maybe PVA really is better than this stuff. Maybe there's a reason this disappeared after the 50s. Okay. But there's one thing that makes hide glue unique, and that is that the gelling and reversal of sticking by heat and moisture are unique to hide glue. Well, what that means is, when you've got this liquid hide glue, just before, this is hot hide glue, it's not liquid hide glue, but it's in a liquid state, so nothing's been added to it. So it's going to gel. So the way hide glue works is, as the temperature comes out of it, it goes from a liquid state to a gel state, then from a gel state to a solid state. And the uniqueness of hide glue is that process is completely reversible forever.
Right.
Okay? Next. So after all of the rabbit hole stuff, I walked away with a number of things that I was more interested in, not the technology of hide glue, but what are the work things that are enabled by hide glue. And I was very surprised after using it for a fairly short amount of time that this stuff came out of use. I mean, it just is quite remarkable material and does so many things, and you make you scratch your head as to how something like this just disappears, because it's almost completely gone. The shop processes that I thought were enabled, that you really, outside of the issue on the finish aside, the woodworking processes that you really can do with hide glue and still have value in the workshop today are rub joints, veneering. Now, I didn't put hammer veneering on there, although most of this is hammer veneering. You can also do regular press veneering if you're using liquid hide glue. Reversibility and grain filling. And grain filling is something that is probably unknown to most woodworkers. And across all of that, it eliminates the issues of what happens when you have squeeze out and then you put a finish on it and you have your fingerprints encased under your woodworking finish forever. So my theory is that rub joints and a variety of hide glue and veneering fell out of use, not because they are not valuable, but because hide glue stopped being prevalent in the workshop. And when the hide glue stopped being there, these work processes had to find other ways of getting themselves done. So, next. All right, hide glue is really extraordinary. It provides joints that last for centuries. And if you walk into any museum of 18th and 17th century furniture, they're all held together with hide glue. In fact, pretty much everything up until 1900, maybe a little later, was held together with hide glue. It's extremely strong. It has properties that are easily modified, and that's something that we're going to talk about and show today. It has an unlimited shelf life, so until you mix it, it'll sit on your shelf forever. You can buy volume and put it on your shelf and not worry about it going bad until you mix it. It will be open for a minute, or it'll be open for 30 minutes, depending on what you do with it. It will stick to itself. PVA glue will not stick to itself. So if you're trying to repair a chair, if you want to, you got to disassemble it, scrape out all the glue, get down to the wood, and then put glue in there and put it together again. With hide glue, you just heat up that joint, put more glue in there, and the hide glue is going to reactivate, and it doesn't matter that it was done 150 years ago. It will gel in 1 minute, or it will never gel, depending on how you treat it. It is reversible. You can glue without clamps. You can glue with clamps. You can do all sorts of veneering. The other part of this that I think is fascinating is that it doesn't creep. So if you have a joint that's under stress, it can move, and it will move. But hide glue is very rigid, and it will stay wherever you put it. So, did I mention that it doesn't impact the finish because it's written up there? And you can use it as a grain filler, which I think is just amazing. So, next.
Jimmy, you said that hide glue sticks to itself,
Yeah.
PVA glue doesn't. What happens if you're incestuous and put both together? Can you have PVA glue and hide glue together, or is that you should just get rid of the PVA glue and go right to hide glue?
Well, theoretically, the hide glue would stick to the PVA glue, but the PVA glue is already compromised, so I would get rid of it. And by the way, I welcome questions, and I even, welcome heckling if you say, well, that's just not true. Feel free, we can discuss it. Okay, so they're a myth. Yes.
You have covered. I'll repeat the question. Just
Good call. Will you be covering grain fill?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Every one of those 4 bubbles up there we're going to do demonstrations on. Okay, so we have myths. Myths about hide glue, that it's messy. It's a little messy, but if you're a slob, what can I tell you? It doesn't require extensive preparation. What requires extensive preparation is the first time you figure out how to do it. And then after that, it's like, oh, that was pretty straightforward. Okay? It's really, you got a pot, you got water, you throw glue in it, you're ready to go. Doesn't require expensive equipment. My glue pot thingy here is about a $20 investment. And if you happen to have an electric pot in your kitchen that your wife won't miss, it's even cheaper. And the other myth is it's not as strong as PVA glue. Okay, so this is going to be interesting because this is where a guy goes, oh, that's not true. Can I have the next slide? I can't tell you how many times I've been in this debate where guys saying my hide glue is stronger than PVA glue, and no, the other guys, my PVA glue is stronger than. The fact is they're both stronger than the grain than the wood fibers itself. So it's a difference without a distinction. It's what's the point? Okay. Okay, so there's a lot written on the internet about hide glue and liquid hide glue, and there are 2 general sources for it. General source 1 are bloggers. Probably want to avoid those. General source 2 is luthiers. You probably want to listen to those because luthiers actually use this stuff. There's a lot of discussion. Even Fine Woodworking has dedicated a number of articles to which glue is stronger. Again, my point is, why did you waste the ink? They're all stronger than the wood. So what do you get out of this discussion? But Susan Buck, who works for the University of Delaware at Winterthur, published a paper for her PhD, The Properties of Commercial Liquid Glue and Traditional Hot Hide Glue in Response to Changes in Relative Humidity. And the bottom line is, your glue of choice is hide glue. And if you're going to put it into an environment that's full of water, you're probably making a mistake. I myself don't build furniture that I'm anticipating being in a room full of water or huge humidity changes. So, and if you go into or any of these museums that have period furniture, none of them are showing the signs of the joints failing. They just don't do it. So this person's not a blogger, okay? So if you have an issue with hide glue being strong or not strong, you have to go tell Susan that her PhD paper was crap, okay? Next. All right, the geeky stuff. Types of hide glue, how it works, gram strength, mixing water ratios. This is that slide that I had all the red and green bubbles on, okay? Next. All right, so for all practical purposes, there are two generic types of things when people say hide glue. There's hot hide glue and there's liquid hide glue. And by liquid hide glue, they mean hot hide glue that a suppressant has been added to make the gel point go away. So it's, this glue right now is liquid. You can see it moving around in there. And yet, it is not liquid hide glue. It is hot hide glue, because I don't have any suppressant in there, okay? And if you think about what you do with these two things, you've got hot hide glue is good for furniture joints, hammer veneering, rub joints, and grain filler. It's not well known for extreme open time, so it's not a good choice. You could, theoretically, if you're really brisk, use a veneer press and hot hide glue, but you'd really need to have the process set down and really moving along. Liquid hide glue is great for furniture joints. You can't hammer veneer with it because it won't gel. You can put it in a veneer press, and in fact, I don't use any of those resin things. This stuff has no creep, has a 30-minute open time. It doesn't screw up the finish. I don't know why you wouldn't use it for a veneer press. You can't use it as a grain filler. You can theoretically use it as a grain filler, but we'll get to why that would probably be a self-defeating process. And it has extreme open time. Next.
Jim, can you name two brands of liquid hide glue? I know that Type On does make a liquid hide glue, and do you classify Old Brown glue as hot hide glue or liquid hide glue?
Okay, the question is what are the types of hide glues you can buy commercially, the liquid ones. Type Bond sells one. I think it used to be under Franklin, but now it's under Type Bond. I've never used it. It comes in a bottle, and I know it's very popular, and I'm sure it works just fine, okay? The Old Brown glue is stuff that Patrick Edwards, who was a woodworker and uses it in his own life, makes his he uses urea as a gel suppressant. They're both liquid hide glue. Right. The viscosity of the Old Brown glue is pretty high, and as he says in his website, you need to put it in a bath of warm water, like a hot tub type of temperature, just to get it to loosen up a little bit. But they're both perfectly good hide glues. What I'm going to show you is you really don't need to buy it. It's so absurdly easy to make. So how it works, as the glue gels, it cools. As it cools, when it gets somewhere between 115 and 95, that's a lot of swing there. But the reason is there's another variable here called the gel strength, which we'll talk about. And depending on the gel strength in that window, it will either go sooner or later, and we'll talk about that. And as the gelling process proceeds, all the moisture leaves the gel and it becomes a solid again. So this is hide glue that's been ground up. It normally comes in sheets. So if I put this in a jar and put water in it, it's going to turn into a mess, a gel. I thought I brought one, but I can't find it. Anyway, or maybe I cooked it, I don't know. When you then heat it, it turns into a liquid. When you apply it to a surface and you put two together, the first thing that happens is it gels and it pulls those two surfaces together. And it's pretty much glued at that point. It's like 80% strength. And within 24 hours, the rest of the moisture leaves it, and it's back to this state, exactly this state. So if you added moisture and water to moisture and heat to this in its glued up state, it will turn back into a gel, back into a liquid. You can pull the thing apart and do the whole thing all over again. That's the reversibility of it. Okay. Next. So if you think about it, hide glue is a state change material. It goes from a solid, you put it in a water bath, for example, about 50 grams of hide glue and about 80 grams of water will turn this into a gel. You then add some heat to it from an outside source, and it becomes a liquid at 140 degrees, and you pretty much don't want to go much above that. You either apply it or remove it, depending on whether you're gluing or reversing, and then let nature just absorb some of the heat out of the joint. It then gels and then becomes a solid. And if you want to reverse it, you just go in the other direction, okay? Moisture, heat, it can make it go, it can change the state of the glue from solid to liquid, or moisture and heat can do it the other way around when it's inside the joint. Next. Okay, one of the puzzles about this is gram strength. The varieties of glue that you can buy today run from a gram strength of 80 up to 512. The two that woodworkers use for the most part is 192 and 251, and the one that I use almost exclusively is 192. And that's because all of the mixing ratios change as the gram strength changes, and I'm not smart enough to remember two things. I can remember this one, so I just do that. And I've never had an issue with it. So I'm about to do something on a ukulele that you helped me with, and I'm going to buy some of this because I need it for the bridge, because it's under a serious amount of shear, and the higher you go in this glue, and if you're curious about, the higher you go with the glue, the more it withstands shear. But if you want to think about how strong is hide glue, they used to take this stuff, the 512, and paint it on glass, and as the hide glue dried and shrank, it chipped off the glass, and that's how they used to get frosted glass. So if you're curious about, is this really strong, try that with your PVA glue. See how that works. Next.
The strength affects the open time. Is that true? Is that a true statement?
Yes. The higher you go, the shorter the open time gets. So if you're having trouble with this, you have two choices. Go down to this, which isn't a good idea, or add some gel suppressant to it, and we'll talk about that. Okay? Next.
Jimmy, your slide's going to be on our website after you finish this?
Yeah, I'll put the whole thing up there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a book that is no longer in print.
Oh, easier.
is a book that's no longer in print, but you can get it in some used bookstores. It's called Animal Glue and Industry. It was written around 1950, and it's really a marketing book for the animal glue industry. And the fascinating thing about it is they tell you about how hide glue was used with vegetables, in woodworking, in bookbinding, every industry, because this was a huge industry back then. They don't make this anymore because it's not a huge industry anymore, and they do other things with bookbinding. But this chart came out of this book, and these are the different gram strengths that the animal glue industry said different industries used. And these are the two, 251 and 192 that are used for woodworking. And we're going to be, what you can see just from this chart, the ratio of water to glue by weight for 192 is 1.7, 1.25 to 1. And for 251 is 2.25 to 1. So the higher the gram strength, the more water you need to get the same results. But you need to experiment with all this stuff because these are just guidances, not absolute rules. Next. Okay. Practical mixing. So you put some, if you take a jar like this, pardon me?
Good jam.
Yeah, it's also, this was used by the Newport furniture makers because of the lip on this, and I'll get into that. This is a very important jar. You want to remember this jar, but if you put glue, say, I don't know, that much glue in the bottom of this, and then you put water in so that it's about half an inch higher than that, it's going to be about right, okay? And you cook it. I don't normally do that because I normally am adding stuff to the glue, unless I'm hammer veneering. If I'm hammer veneering, I'll just make a batch and let it go where it goes. So I make a batch of 50 grams of glue, 80 grams of water, and that I call my standard batch, because if I want to make liquid hide glue, I simply take 15 grams of salt and add it to that, and I have liquid hide glue. So the amount of, you can't go to your computer and order hide glue faster than you can make hide glue in your workshop. I mean, if you have a salt and you have a wrist, and you can go like this, you can make liquid hide glue. It's very complex. So those are the two charts. One, mix it by eye, and then you just test it when you're done, and if it's too thick, add a little hot water to it, and if it's too thin, cook it a little, and it'll get to the, right, go. Okay, modifying properties of hide glue. Salt or urea. If you've got hide glue, it's hot, it's going to set up in a minute or two because your shop is cool, because that depends, you know. And you really need it to be out there a little bit. You add maybe 5% by weight. Since you know you put 50 grams in the jar, you know how much hide glue is in there, so 12% more, and you'll get a 10-minute open time. And it'll still be hot hide glue, it'll still gel, but it'll gel slower. You add 30% by weight, and it becomes liquid hide glue. So if you know you have started with 50 grams, you know how much that 50%, that 30% of that is 50. 30% of 50 is 50, you got the idea. I think. Did I say that right? It's 30, yeah, I said it right. So you can use the same stuff, salt or urea, to just extend the open time of what you have, or make it liquid. If you want to improve the tack, like we'll get into the myth of, what do you call this? toothing planes. The myth of toothing planes, you can get the same result with vinegar. If you add vinegar, it'll improve the adhesion. I've never found a reason to do it, but you can do it. Glycerin, if you add, I said hide glue doesn't creep, and it's pretty stiff when it's dry. If you're doing things like timbers behind a timber drawer, you want that glue to be a little flexible. Take your hide glue, add about 5% glycerin to it, and it's going to be nice and flexible for history.
Canvas to wood.
Pardon me?
The canvas to wood adhesion, is that what you're talking with the tambour?
Yeah, yeah. The canvas in the back, yeah. Next. So the kit, what you need to do this is you need a container that you can adjust the heat, because you want it, if you have one that happens to be registered at 140 degrees, you don't need to change anything, that's just fine. You need a container for the glue, and that's where this period Newport jar comes in, okay? This jar wants to be suspended in the water. It doesn't want to drop down and sit on the bottom, because the heating element is going to be a lot hotter than you want it to be. So the glue on the bottom is going to be way past 140 when you think it's just fine. So you need something that suspends the glue in the top. And I have this period correct piece of acrylic that I drilled a hole, or cut a hole in with a coping saw. And this sits in it because this is the only jelly jar on the planet that has this little ridge around the top. So, but if you're going to use this, you should eat the jelly first. So don't.
$1.50 a jar.
Yeah.
Very good jelly.
Jim, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there a benefit of using glass over a metal jar or something else?
No.
Okay.
It's just, they don't make this when they sell the jelly, it's glass.
But the commercial, if you buy a commercial heater, it's made from luthiers, for example, everything's brass. The thing you suspend it in, the glue goes in, that's all solid brass. You just pay $140 for the heater instead of $20.
Well, they don't even make those anymore. So- But if you know the waxers you use when you're getting ready to put on your Speedos to go to the beach? Those waxers, I see people using them as a double boiler, and so, you could probably do that.
Now I know why my hide glue is always fluctuating, because I have it sitting on the bottom of the crock pot.
Right, so it's helpful to suspend it. You need a thermometer, and I just keep the thermometer in there. This is just not getting hot.
I hear it keep going, turning on and off.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Can I add a heat source to the, there's a new thing to make your heat source, and that is if you just go to your local online retailer, look for a coffee mug warmer that you put on your desk.
Yeah.
And it's just a disc, and there's a high and a low, and it automatically shuts off after 6 or 8 hours. And you can make that your heat source and make a double boiler by, using a cup and then putting your jelly jar in the cup, or that. And that works, and I think the 140 is the top temperature on that one, too.
If that generates enough heat to do that, that would work. So this is an electric tea thing that kids would get when they go to college to make their ramen noodles. And you have to get a very precise adjusting mechanism down here and mark it so that you get the exact right temperature. And this one This one, the temperature used to be where this mark is here, and as you can see, it's much lower than that now. And the reason is, this thing stopped working a couple of years ago, and I took it apart and resoldered the rheostat, and ever since then, it's a different temperature, so. My wife said, "Really, you just didn't buy a new one?" I said, all right, next. So that's it, that's the kit. It's a teapot, electric teapot. I think they're right around $20 now on Amazon. The acrylic, it doesn't have to be acrylic. I tried using wood, it really doesn't. It's too much heat and moisture. So why this? So a lot of things you see, there's a pot and it's open and then the jar is in the middle. I found that if you do not seal the top of this jacket, that temperature goes all over the place and your hot pot is constantly on. So you seal this, and it also has the double benefit of suspending your glue jar in that thing. And then I normally use this, it's a piece of HDMI plastic, and I use it to cover the top of the glue, because the glue will skin over in no time at all. But I wound up getting new glue brushes that don't fit this, so I had to adapt, and I took the top of my cheese dip and put it in here. So. When you're using hide glue, flexibility is important. So, next. So I buy my stuff from Bourne Industries. I buy $192 and $291, and shipping is expensive. So if you're going to buy this stuff, the way to buy it is the same way you should buy veneers. Find a couple of guys that want to buy glue. It's a lot cheaper if you buy 5 pounds and have it shipped than try to buy 1 pound. For example, if you buy a pound of this stuff on Amazon, it's about 30 bucks. If you buy 10 pounds of it from Bourne Industries, it boils down to about 15 bucks, including shipping. So I bought some extra when I bought for this. I bought 2 5-pound bags instead of one, and I split one of the 5-pound bags into 1-pound bags. And I'm selling them for 15 bucks, which is exactly what it cost me with shipping. So if one of you guys want to dip in and give it a try, there's 5 of them there.
Such a deal.
That's $192, and it's high purity. So if you...
Box of cookies with it?
I should get the box of cookies.
Woodworkers.
I forgot what I was going to say. Next.
Thin mints, doesn't it?
It's important not to mix up the two. The cookies and the glue.
That's right. Although you could eat the hide glue. It's perfectly, it's gel. If you go to the supermarket and buy Knox gel, it's a little gel tabs. It's about 315 gram strength. So. Okay, so liquid hide glue, it's formulated to stay liquid at room temperature, no glue pot required. That's not exactly true, okay? You need to warm this stuff up, or it's, for example...
Yes.
This is liquid hide glue, and most people would say, not liquid, okay? But if you just drop it in there for a couple of minutes, once it heats up, it stays liquid for several hours. I mean, it starts to get a little more viscous. But when I made and when I talked about mixing this, here, you can pass this around. When you talk about mixing this, I'll get into some of the minutia on it. So the nice thing about liquid hide glue is it stays fresh forever, because it's got so much salt in it. It's just, you're basically preserving it. It's easy to make, so I make it on demand. When I'm going to start a project, I take out my planes, I sharpen the ones I'm gonna use, I sharpen the chisel I'm gonna use, and I make a batch of liquid hide glue of about 5 ounces, because that's what I'm gonna use to make a table, and I know that it's fresh. Because the hide glue you buy in the store has a shelf life. Now, the old brown glue, it says technically that the shelf life is 1.5 years. Sounds like a bit much to me, but, he's a very reputable guy, so I presume it's true. The problem is when you buy it, you don't know how far into that 1.5 years you are unless you can read the date codes on it, and I don't know. I haven't bought the stuff since a long time ago. So, next. So, when I make up liquid hide glue, I use, the way I came about this formula is, when I was doing my research, there was this thing on all the bloggers that said, you take hot hide glue and add 5 to 15% salt by weight, salt, period. Not by weight, not by volume, just 5 by 15%. Went on to about 5 or 6 different websites, and they all had that exact same sentence. You cannot make liquid hide glue doing that either by volume or weight. It's just, so one blogger wrote it, obviously never did it. Everybody else thinks that must be how you do it, and they all write it as if they did it, and none of them did it, okay? Because what I wound up doing was making a batch of hide glue, and I started at 5%. It doesn't form hide glue. 10%, 15%. I had to get up to 30% before it started to behave like liquid hide glue. So I arrived at mine empirically. So you can either go with the bloggers and cook a brick, or you can go with this formula and have liquid hide glue. And it's basically, and this is the important one, it's the parts. Always start with the glue, whatever you say, how much glue, I'm going to give you 100 grams, 10 grams, 5 ounces, a pound, it doesn't matter, you start there. That becomes the unit. 3 parts of whatever you're making is the gel suppressant, and 16 parts of water. So if you're making 50 grams, that's 15 grams of salt and 80 grams of water, and that's my standard batch. So I always have, I make a couple of jars of the standard batch, and I let them gel up, and then I take them out of the jar, and I put them in the freezer. Do not put them in the, do you want to tell them why you shouldn't put them in the freezer, Jeff, when you...
No, I would.
Okay.
I don't have a microphone.
Anybody that's ever done this has put it back in the freezer in the jar, and the bottom blows off the bottom of the jar. Everybody, myself, isn't that curious? So, don't do that. Take it out of the jar, put it in a plastic bag, and if you're wondering how long it'll last, most people say it'll last months, maybe a year. Before this presentation, I was rummaging through my freezer in the garage, and I had this plastic bag that said 2002, and it had these little things of hide glue in it. And I was curious, and I cooked it up. Works great. Now,
Really?
I wouldn't recommend doing that at home. Leave that to the hide glue professionals, but it lasts a long time if you put it in the freezer, okay?
I had a bag that we made together 2017, and it's still good.
Yeah. Okay. Next. All right, so this is a real eye chart, but these are the different formulas that you'll find out there. This is what Bourne Industry is saying. It's 0.18 to 1 does not make liquid hide glue. This is 0.2 to 1. This is the glue industry, that book. But the glue industry is using 251 strength, and they're using something called thiourea. I have no idea what it is, except the EPA says it's carcinogenic, so you probably don't want to do that. WoodNet says 0.15 to 1. Workbench Diary says 2 to 1. Don Williams, you know who Don Williams is? Don Williams, famous curator from the Smithsonian. His is 50 to 1, 0.5 to 1. And mine is 0.3 to 1. Where is it? The solubility of salt in 100 grams of water is 36 grams. So Don Williams' formula will precipitate out. So I don't know how much of that salt is really in that formula. It does work. He's a reputable guy. There's no doubt about that it makes liquid hide glue because it's more than mine. And even mine at 30%, you'll see some precipitation. But you also get that behavior where, I don't know where the glue is that's roaming around, but it's obviously not, yeah, I need it up here. It's obviously not liquid, and you need to warm it up. The difference between salt and urea, thank you, is that the solubility of urea is about 108 grams per 100 grams of water. So you can just keep throwing urea in there. And if your urea is not carcinogenic, thiourea is. So if you're really interested in trying to get this stuff to be floating around at room temperature, if that's important to you, then, go to the urea and just keep adding more grams until it does that. I'm always going to have this in a warm bath anyway, so it never struck me as important to add more stuff to it than I needed to get the 30-minute open time. Okay?
Where do you get urea? Do you get it the same?
Amazon.
Yeah.
We've got some here.
But you can't use regular salt as a substitute for urea?
Yeah, you pick one, either one.
If you mix urea and salt in the same batch, what would happen?
You're doing the whole thing by weight, so my expectation is nothing, as long as you stick with the weight formulas.
Okay.
It's like, should I use table salt or kosher salt? And it doesn't matter, because you're weighing it.
Depends on if you're Jewish, right?
Okay, so we don't need this slide anymore.
Kosher salt isn't kosher.
All right, we're going to get to demonstrations.
Or kosher.
Is now a good time for a short break, or is it should? Those don't exist.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a board that I used a couple of years ago and doing a demo very similar to this for the New Hampshire Guild. So this stuff's been stuck down for, I don't know, a couple of years. This is the backer. We just glued it up, and I took some of this off last night just to make sure I wasn't going to make a fool of myself here. So all you need to get this stuff up is some moisture and some heat. So you wet it down, and you take an iron, and what you absolutely don't want to do is stop the iron. If you stop the iron from moving, it will stick to the veneer. And you will then have to take your iron to your belt sander. This iron used to be this thick.
So how do you unglue a joint?
That's a lot more problematic. I use a heat gun a lot of time. Some people add, you can see I'm getting this under here. And I find that it's easier to use a rag that's wet because it generates steam. And so it's heat and moisture. Now, make a mental image of this. When we get to the grain filler, you're going to want to say, wait a minute, Okay, so I drew a knife line down here, so we didn't have to do the whole thing. But that was down 3 or 4 years ago. However, I don't remember. I was much younger. There's a temptation to just let the iron sit there. Now, for those of you who think that, well, you know, this is a throwback stuff, but the guy is, you know, he's using an electric iron. I have an old cast iron that they used to use, put on the stove, and that's what those guys used to use. And I did use that at one time, but I decided to step into the 20th century and yes, a concession.
The first time I used an iron in this kind of fashion, my wife wasn't really pleased.
You know, speaking of which, I after doing this, so that's it. It's up. And I took off about, I don't know, a sixth of that thing. So how long would it take to get this whole thing off? Not very long at all. And you can now glue back down onto the surface. It's a perfectly fine surface. Because
Your substrate there being MDF, you know, and that much moisture, does it really swell?
well, sure it would on the edges, but whenever I'm using MDF as a substrate, which I like a lot, I size the edges with hide glue. And, you know, that'll swell them a little bit, and then you just sand them down to get them true, and you have much less of a problem. And there's way more water involved in getting this stuff off than putting it on.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's reversibility. Now this glue, there's a little bit here. If I wanted to put another piece of veneer down on this thing, I could use some of this glue that's on there, or, you know, some people say, I gotta scrape this stuff off and get it. You don't need to. It's just gonna be reactivated by the glue you put it down on. One of the things you need when you're doing hide glue for veneering is you need a fairly wide chisel. It doesn't need to be sharp. In fact, you don't really want, I mean, it's got an edge on it, it'll eventually cut you, but you really, you don't have to be very wedded to this, because it's going to get rusty, and, you know, and it's going to get a lot of crap on it. But you want something that has a reasonably flat back, has a reasonably decent bevel. You don't have to hone it, you don't have to, you know, run it on your strop or anything like that, because you really don't want to be digging into the substrate, and you don't want to be digging into. So a good way to deal with this is, when you have one of these boards that I put on the workbench, and it's just melamine, and glue gets on there, I use the back of this to clean off the stuff, and that puts enough of a dullness on the back of this thing so that when you're using it to lift off veneers, it works perfectly. But you have to dedicate, you don't take one of your really good chisels for this thing. This was warm water. This is any old cotton rag, and that's reversibility. Any questions?
Was that hide glue or liquid hide glue that you just took off of there?
That would have been hide glue, but it wouldn't matter. Okay. Okay, let's talk about rub joints. This tabletop was put together with a rub joint, and the rub joint is there. So, you know, like any joint, if it's properly prepared, and the rub action is, the glue isn't cold, because if it's cold, it'll create a thickness. In fact, I made this for this demonstration. It's a brick, maybe a drawer front. And the shop is about 55 degrees when I did this. I did not heat the wood, I didn't thin out the glue when I laid down the first layer, and you'll see on this layer, particularly over here, you can see a glue line, okay? And that's because I was really being cavalier. The wood was cold, the glue was, it was 140 degrees, but it was a little thick, could have been cooking for a while. And I just rubbed this joint, and I said, that's fine. And by the time I finished, I saw, well, there's a glue line here, but if you get to the top, I thinned out the glue a little bit. I used a little more pressure, but that's that's the good and the bad of a rub joint for gluing. So, next slide.
Jim, do you add water regularly? Do you pot if it's going all day? Do you have any,
Yeah.
tricks for, what you think the viscosity should be?
Yeah.
Drip time, or?
Yep, that's a good time to talk about that. Okay, so I have a little, I don't know where it is, too much crap here. I have a little tablespoon, regular kitchen tablespoon. My wife no longer has it in the kitchen. But what I do when the glue starts to thicken up a little bit is I simply slide it over, I take the tablespoon of hot water, and I'll put half of it, all of it, depending on how thick it is, and then stir it up again. You don't want to put cold water in there, because it's already thick, and you don't want it to drop the temperature. But basically what you want to do is be able to take this up out of the glue about 8 to 10 inches and have it stream off, okay? So it should look pretty much like that. So if you make hide glue and it's thicker than that, remember the 80 grams of water, 50 grams of, so maybe you need 85 grams of water. My formula used to be 85 grams of water to 50, until I got this most recent batch of hide glue, and when I mixed it up, it was way too watery. So I took 5 grams of water out of the next batch, and it was fine. So you do need to, look at it, and so if I didn't put this lid on here, and I got a little cutout so that my glue brush is covered by it, covers it, that top would skin over, and the top would be cold and the bottom would be warm, so it's best to just keep a jacket over the water bath and to keep a jacket over the glue bath, and in my opinion, it works better. The other thing you need to make hide glue is a scale, and this is the one I used until 2 weeks ago. And it's just a little simple, couldn't be easier, mix it in, because this really isn't that exact, right? And that was fine, but, since I was going to do a demonstration, I wanted to have something really, really fancy, so I bought this little scale from Amazon for $9. This is great. I don't know why I was using this piece of crap for all those years.
Because you had it in your wife's kitchen.
It has tear weight on it, and it goes down to 1/10 of a gram. This thing goes down to the nearest 50 grams. It's perfect. And it comes with a little 100-gram registration weight, so when you put it on here, you register this thing on. You really feel like a scientist with this. $9, I mean, good Lord.
Is the white coat optional with the?
Oh, yeah, well, I do wear a smock, and I like it better than an apron, so. Oh, no, we're not up to this, go back one. So, we're going to do a rub joint. That's not it. So these are two pieces of pine. The type of wood doesn't matter. As you can see from that, that's cherry and that worked just fine. Like I said before, hide glue is not messy at all. So, just get all this stuff in again. Okay. So the way this stuff works is you get two pieces of wood and you plane the surfaces so that they're really nice. And you put glue on the surfaces and you put them together and you rub them and you walk away. It couldn't be simpler. In fact, that's what most, in the old, when they had hide glue running around all the time, they didn't go through a lot of these huge glue-up clamp panel things. They just put two pieces of wood together. While I'm doing this, yeah, well, I made a little thing to hand out to you guys, but there's too much crap here, so I don't know where it is. You saw the round one, so I had a sample of a rub joint that I was going to hand out, but I don't know where it is. Oh, here it is. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a decent glue joint. And this surface, I don't think I brought a square. Did I bring a square?
Yeah, you should put a square in there.
So you want to make sure, if this is your registration face and this is your registration edge, you want to make sure, wow. So I made this yesterday, and this was dead square yesterday. And just, I mean, this goes, if you're going to make a joint, glue it when you make it, not put it. So this side, this is perfectly square back here. This side is, this is up, so. Got that number 5?
I've seen it already.
Do I have a pencil in here? I have no memory, so I have to mark it. All right, so this, have you guys noticed that the floor is getting further and further away? All right, so this needs to come down. And this is a cambered blade, so I'm just going to put the blade over. So I'm only taking off this side and then put it in the middle and take a complete stroke. And that's square, so here, well, here's my test, this is my Vanna White.
Hey, quiet.
Dead on, right?
Dead nuts.
All right, so this one's still square, so. All right, so theoretically, these two are gonna have a nice glue joint. And you're gonna notice that I did not tooth these edges. And I'll explain in a minute why that is important to me. So I'm just going to put some hide glue on this. And these are pretty cool. You just put these in, and they're sliding around like crazy now because this glue is a lubricant. And I'm trying to keep the face edges aligned, and it's starting to grab now. And I'm pushing down to try to get the glue out of the joint. And that's it. So that glue joint is done.
Jim, do you ever glue, do you ever clamp up these?
No, I don't. There's really no point. So what you do now is just put this on the side. You got some squeeze out here. And these things should be, so it's straight up and down. Well, no, it's not. It's bowed a little, so I guess I wasn't as square as I thought. Or I didn't squeeze the glue out as much as I would want. If I looked at this and said, I'm not happy with this, now's the time to undo this, because you can just pull it apart, okay? This squeeze out with hide glue, what you want to do is wait like 10 or 15 minutes, and this will turn into a pretty thick gel. And you can just kind of roll it off with your fingers. If you let that glue sit overnight, you're going to take up some of the wood with it. It is really strong, okay? So, like right now, I can peel off that glue, okay? So that's it on a rub joint. So a lot of people would say, well, I don't need to do that. I've got this nice clamping set up for my panels, and why would I bother doing that? You shouldn't if you're comfortable with another way of doing it. If you were going to clamp it up in a panel, I would recommend using liquid hide glue, because that's not going to screw up your surface, and you don't have to worry about
So if you wanted to take this apart right now,
it'll come apart.
you would just put water?
No, you
don't have to.
I could, it's about 80% of its glue joint, but you could pull it apart, okay? But normally people just lay it up against the wall and let it come back tomorrow. So this would come back tomorrow, you'd lay it down, you'd get a hand plane, you'd go perpendicular to it to flatten the surface, then go perpendicular, and you have a finished surface, okay?
Jim, I'm sorry, can I just ask a question about that? So if you did pull it apart, and you wanted to just put it back together again, what's left there is starting to solidify a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So do we have to heat that at all?
No, when you put the hot hide glue on it, it'll reactivate the hide glue that's on there. You might want to wipe it off, because if the issue that you're having, like, I thought this was planed very straight, so I either left, I wasn't pushing down evenly to get all the glue out, so maybe on the back side, there's a little more glue than on the front side, so that might be it, or I didn't plane it right. So that way I just wipe it off, plane the surface, put it back together again. Because even if this is PVA glue, if this joint isn't completely flat when you glue it up, the joint's bad. Whether it's PVA glue or hide glue or liquid hide glue, it doesn't matter. Fix the joint, you know. Okay, next. No, go back. So,
Excuse me, just one more question on the rub joint.
yeah.
So your cleanup, after you put it together, your cleanup is to wait until you can roll it off with your,
Yeah, 10 or 15 minutes.
so you don't wait and chisel, use a chisel or a plane to,
No, if it sets up that hard, you have a very good risk of pulling wood out with the glue, okay? if you use liquid hide glue, the liquid hide glue takes forever to skin over. I mean, what happens is the glue squeezes out, and then it forms a skin, like an eggshell, around the liquid hide glue. But the stuff inside the eggshell is going to stay liquid for days. I mean, days. It's just not going to dry out. So liquid hide glue, you want to kind of rub it off with a little water and whatnot, unlike hot hide glue, which is, because the liquid hide glue won't gel. It dries by having the water absorbed out of it, and the water takes forever after it skins over. It's protecting itself. Okay, so we're going to do a little bricking here. So you saw that bricking thing, and I'm doing this mainly because whenever I go to a woodworking meeting and the topic of a curved surface comes up, you know, everybody talks about bent laminations and steam bending and jigs and forms and all that other stuff. And I always say, well, you know, what about bricking? And then everybody kind of looks sideways at me, and then they go back to talking about bent laminations and whatnot, okay? So we're going to brick this, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to brick something and how fast it is to brick something. By the time you get your bandsaw out and start cutting your laminations and smoothing them in your sander and all that other stuff, you'd be finished bricking. So I took a board, swung a trammel point at about 18 inches, measured out an inch and drew a line down the center, and measured out an inch and a half, drew a line down the center, and measured that angle, okay? So these are all 3 inches wide with an angle that is going to meet down at 18 inches if you put this right at the 18-inch mark. So I don't need my board anymore because I have this. So the first thing you do is take one of your bricks, put a little glue on the end grain, take another one, put a little glue on the end grain, and you want to rub these two together. And it doesn't take long for them to stick together, okay? Now, you take your next brick, you put a little glue on the bottom, you put a little glue on here, and you rub this right over the two of those, and this is where I wasn't pushing down hard enough with the other one, and that one is now stuck in place, and it's joining these two bottom pieces. So now I just take my glue, little glue here, little glue there, take my next two, put them together. No screws, no nails, no routers. And all I'm doing is I'm splitting the difference and making sure the fronts stick together. I'll do one more. Whoops. All right, so what were we doing this, a minute, 2 minutes, something like that? You can see how this would just move along. Where's my, Where's my brick drawer front? Oh, the one I have. So, you can see that if you were making, and this is typically done for Pembroke table, thank you, Pembroke table aprons that are curved, or any curved surface. Draw fronts are great for this. The benefit of bricking is that this thing is crazy strong. You could just stand this on the floor, stand on it, it's not going to break. It's not going to spring back. It's not going to do anything that a regular slab of wood wouldn't do. So when you fit this into your drawer opening, you've got it might as well be flat. It's that easy to do, and it's that fast to do. And in order to get this thing to get rid of these, and I'll just stick to this board here. In order to get this thing to curve, you can do it with a router. You can take that thing that you use to make with the trammel, cut it out, screw it onto the bottom, and then use a router to, smooth this out. But a much easier way is to use a compass plane. That's how this was done. And you just put it in a vise, a couple of minutes, and this thing takes the shape of your compass plane. So, very handy. I don't use these a lot, but when you need them, there's just no other tool that's like it.
We had a meeting a few years ago out in Concord with a guy, I forget the guy's name, but he makes banjos, and that's how he makes the shells.
Same way? Yeah.
So Jim, you said that you can tear out some of the wood if the glue gets too dry. How hard is the glue on the tools if the glue gets dried overnight? What's it going to do to my chisels, to my planes, if it's dry, if it's hard?
Well, I normally take the top stuff off with a hand scraper.
Okay.
Because they're easy to fix, and then I go with a hand plane, but it's not going to damage. It's not like when you take a piece of plywood and you push it through your joiner. It's not that type of,
I assume you can sand it as well?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, it's a great advantage of not having to clamp it up. That's the big deal. That's the big advantage.
Right.
It would be so hard to clamp up something that shape with regular glue.
Well, when you make one of these with the traditional, the current method is you make a form, and then you screw the bottom layer on with the form, okay? And then you put it on your router and you make that, you shape the, then you put the second layer on and you wait for your PVA glue to dry. However, and normally people put nails or something through the top, and then they put it through the router again, and then you stack it up, put it through the router again. And this whole thing, this was like 25 minutes of my time. I really should have waited for the glue to completely set up, but I was in a rush, so I didn't. But if I was making this for myself, I would have waited a day before I planed it. Okay? And this is why, if you look at the aprons on all the old Pembroke tables, they look like this. They don't look like a surface because there was no reason to clean this up. But if I wanted to clean it up, I just make my compass plane go the other way, and you can clean it up. Okay? The other thing that is where you want to use a rub joint is places where you can't get a clamp. This is a mock-up I made of a table I was making. I wanted to make sure it had the right scale and everything, and you can see there's a little glue block, and all these old ones had glue blocks in this corner. And the way that's put in is with a rub joint, because if you say, well, how am I going to clamp this? You can, if you had a lot of time on your hands, but there's really no need, because all you needed to do is take a little stick, a little glue, go like this, put it down and walk away, and you're done. So another place to use a rub joint So you have a Queen Anne leg. And you have these knee blocks. And these knee blocks are notoriously difficult to glue in place. But all you need to do with this, I was going to do it, but then I decided, no, I'm not going to do it. You've seen it happen. The miracle will happen. You put glue here, you put glue there, you just put this in place, you rub it, you leave this proud of this surface, because you're going to fare it down using this as the reference edge, and you're done. You know, and I've seen so many articles with people putting bedroom spring clamps from their bed. No, they always take the spring from their wife's side of the bed. But that's how you would use this for a Queen Anne leg, and these are from my Queen Anne days. I'm not there anymore. Okay. All right, now we can go to grain filler. Okay, so this is the one part of today where we're not going. It's a little wet, but you can pass it around. Yeah. So grain filling.
You want to scrape off your rough joint right now?
What's that?
You want to show us your rough joint, see if it'll scrape off? The two pieces of wood that you put over there.
I'm sorry.
This will peel off, actually.
Can you peel off the...
Oh, yeah, feel free to peel away, yeah. John, what do you say?
Your first rub joint you made, can we peel it up? Give us a peeling demonstration.
The one on the table.
Is it set up yet?
Yeah, pass that around. Yeah, this is about where I would pull it off. Here.
Jim, I just have one more question before you...
It's probably not toxic, I don't know if
Just one more question before you leave the rub joint, is that how long should we leave that to set before we can actually start working it with a plane or something like that?
Most of the books say that you should leave it overnight. I was able to do that curved surface a lot sooner, but that curved surface is inherently much stronger than that, because it's captured on four sides in a piece of wood. So I would leave it overnight. I mean, hide glue lets you do things fast, but you still can't use them right away. It's not like CA glue.
Right.
Okay?
Right, okay.
Okay, so we're going to do more demonstrations. This thing on grain filler is not a demonstration as much as a handout, because a demonstration of grain filling is literally like watching paint dry. Okay? So we're not going to do that. In this book, this is how I got into this. In this book, there's a paragraph. This is it, the whole thing. The use of animal glue sizes in finishing of quality furniture surfaces is not commonly known by the public at large. That was true. In this process, a dilute warm animal glue solution at approximately 1 pound of glue per gallon of water is applied to the wood surface and let dry. The compression grain is raised and the glue fills the pores, exposed wood structures. On sanding, a glass-like surface is obtained which is stable against moisture changes and which takes a lasting finish or stain. So I read that and I said, wow, I think I'll try that. I won't tell you what happened the first time I tried it right away. I'll wait till I'm doing the hammer veneering. But their solution is pretty watery, okay? My solution their solution is about 8.4 parts water to 1 part glue. Mine is more like 6 parts water. It was really runny. But anyway, so what I'm going to hand out is this Babinga, this is some burl mahogany. This is the raw veneer. This is what it looks like when it's been filled, scraped, and with a coat of shellac on it. And this is just 1 coat, so if I really wanted to glass this thing up, you just keep doing it until you get the results you like. This is a piece of the, yes?
Did you sand it afterwards? Meaning, when you put the hide?
Did you sand the surface after the hide glue application and it was dry?
Okay, so the book, the animal glue industry says you put it on and you sand it. I don't sand a lot of things. I scrape. So my solution was to put it on, scrape it, and then I took a pad of 400 400 sandpaper, and just went over the top. It looks like crap when you're done, until you put a finish on it, and then it's like, wow, okay? So this one is Babinga. Babinga is notoriously open grain, very hard to finish. This is what it looks like in its native environment, and this is what it looks like with a coat of grain filler and shellac. And this I made yesterday. Those 2 are veneers. This one's solid wood. So this is a piece of South American mahogany. The back of it is South American mahogany. You've probably all seen it. This side of the front, and it's written over here, so it comes with crib sheets. It comes with crib sheets. This side is what it looks like after you've put a grain filler on it and scraped it, okay? This is what it looks like when you've put a coat of shellac on it and rubbed it out. But what you get, so the process is as follows. Here's a quick demonstration. You put the wood down, you get your watery mixture of you slop it on and move it aside. End of filling process, okay? But you really want to kind of rub it in. You want to make sure it gets in there. And the way to make this stuff, instead of the 8-to-1, 6-to-1, yada, 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 you always have some hide glue. So you take a jar and you put about, I don't know, not even that much, okay? And you put a stick in there, and you take it out like you do with your old, when you used to change your oil. So this is how much glue I have in there. So you measure up 4 more units of that, put it back in and pour water in until you hit that 4th unit, mix it up, heat it up, and paint it on. It's really runny. I mean seriously runny, okay? I've got a little thing here on the bottom. You can't see it because it says you got to be careful when doing this with a veneer. And I started this with a veneer. And I had this nice veneered surface, and I put on the grain filler and lifted the veneer right off the thing. Because one of the 2 things you need to get something reversed in hide glue, with hide glue. Heat and water. Heat and water. What did you just do? You just poured heat and water on it, okay? So if you're going to do this with veneer, and I have done it with veneer, you need to make a thicker mixture. But there's even a better solution, and you need to be brisk about it. And just don't be rubbing it in, I'll just lay it on and see what happens. But there's a much better solution when we get to hammer veneering. All right, I think that covers the grain filling.
You said the grain filling doesn't work with, I mean, it does with hot hide glue, but with bottled hide glue, it doesn't.
No, well, I've never used it, but my experience with liquid hide glue is when the top has skinned over, the bottom is still really wet. So my guess is if you wanted to do it with liquid hide glue, you'd have to, A, water it down, B, brush it on, and walk away for about 2 weeks. I'm serious about the two. It amazes me how long the squeeze out from liquid hide glue stays liquid.
Jim, how long did you wait after you put it on? Could you stand it the next day?
Oh, yeah, next day, absolutely.
Let it look on it.
Just an article, yeah.
Next. Okay, so this is a paid political announcement. So, the commercial grain fillers, there are two types. There's oil-based and there's magic chemicals, whatever it is. And I just went, the day before yesterday and looked, and the one that's very popular is this Aquacoat. It costs $45 a quart. It comes with all the charm of wood under glass when you put this on and then put a finish on it, because it's plastic, all right? And you, after spending your $45 a quart, you use it or lose it. It's got a shelf life and that's it. You use hide glue. I calculated it's about $3.50 a quart, although I can't imagine why anybody would mix a quart. You really get a beautiful finish with it, and I mix it on demand. I just take a little hide glue, pour it in a jar, add water, wait 5 minutes as it heats up, and brush it on. It couldn't be simpler. But just because it's simple doesn't make it why I should use this because it's simple. Use it because it gives you a spectacular finish that you're not going to get with a commercial one. If you use the oil-based fillers, for any of you who have used it, they do a good job. They fill and they get the right color. They take forever to dry, and they are messy as hell when you're applying them. I mean, you really feel like you destroyed your project when you start wiping this up. Next. Okay, so this is my mixture. This is the animal glue industry mixture. For every 50 grams of glue, you have 417 grams of water. That's a lot you're going to wind up with a lot of water. So mine is, I go with the quadruple the volume, this one, and I told you how I do it. If you do the arithmetic of how much glue is in there and water and all that stuff, don't take this out to more than no decimal places, okay? This is not a science. So I simply put a stick in, see how high the glue is, measure up to 4 times that, add the water, use it, okay? Next. Okay, hammer veneering. Okay, real low-tech stuff. So to hammer veneer, hey, look at this. See it skinning over?
Yeah.
Can you get your camera on there?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm showing him how the screw is skinning over because I didn't put the thing on. See? Sticking to the brush.
Jim, do you kill what kind of bristle on your brush, natural or?
I kill badgers, and I make sure so I went out and bought a really expensive glue brush when I started, and it didn't seem to be any different than any other glue, any other brush. So what I use now is the China bristle brushes. They're about $1 a piece.
They used to be.
Okay. Well, you're paying the tariff on it. So what I do is I take off about 1/3 of the length, because there's just too much. You want it a little stiffer. So you just put it down on a piece of wood, take a sharp chisel, go across, and it's 1/3 longer than it used to be, and they work great. This one's this wide, you get one this wide, and the other one I use is acid brushes, but those really have to be cut in half, not the length, the bristle end, because they're much too hairy. Now,
You use the spongy brushes?
I've never tried that. I never tried that. So the other thing about the brushes is people talk about let's clean up these brushes when you're done. I don't. I wipe them off on the edge of the jar, and I put them aside, and I let them get hard. And the next day, when I'm making the glue, I just put them back in the glue and let the glue soften up the hide glue. So there's no real need. The other thing is, when these brushes are new, as you all know with these brushes, you'll get little things coming out, but after you use it, the glue goes in here. It doesn't come out anymore. So. Okay, so this is veneer. This is poplar. This is what you call backer veneer, right? If you want to buy veneer, the place to get it is Certainly Woods in West Aurora, East Aurora, Aurora something in New York. The guys are great. They have a great website. The shipping is good. It's not super expensive, and you have pictures of all their flitches. But most importantly, for guys like us, is when their flitches get down around 100 square feet, if you buy the whole flitch, it's like 1/3 what they were charging per square foot for this. So like Jeff and Ken and I bought the ending flitch of a batch of poplar. I think we spent $100 on the whole flitch, and we all walked away with more poplar veneer than you could possibly. So if you want to learn, that's the way to buy your stuff. So like the glue, if you go in with 2 or 3 guys, buy the end of a flitch, and you're going to have plenty of veneer. Okay, so.
They're cheap enough.
All right, so I cut everything on a piece of MDF. Any flat surface will do, plywood, pretty much anything. Okay. So you need a straight edge, and there are 2 ways to cut veneer. I'm sure there's more than 2. There's 2 ways I use to cut veneer. Problematic part of veneering are the edges. They're always going to want to lift, and you can get them to all stay down, but my solution to it is make the thing bigger than you want it to be and take it down with the saw when it's already glued up. It saves a lot of stuff. So if I was going to glue this thing down, this is where my veneer and my cross banding is going to end. So you really only need the markings on the edge of the board, like here and here and here and here. Okay? Because I'm going to lay the veneer down, and it's going to be bigger than this section. And then I'm going to put this down on top of this and take it down with my saw to fit the line, okay? So you want to get 2 pieces of veneer that look like so, and you want to have there are 2 ways to do this. One, you put one down, overlap the second one, then cut down the middle, and the 2 join together. The other is to have these 2 surfaces butted. So you lay one down and you butt them together. So there are problems associated with each of them, okay? But when I'm doing highly figured wood, I go with the butting because I'm trying to book match highly figured stuff. So when you start to overlap highly figured stuff, you can't be convinced you're really going to nail that book match. So I butt joint the wood. So I'm going to show you how I go about edge joining veneers. So you just put them together. We are gonna get to hide glue sooner or later here. So I just put a little tape. Okay. So I want to, I'm sticking this veneer, and this will work with one piece of veneer, so the fact that I have two of them doesn't matter. So I'm sticking this out no more than 1/16 of an inch. And then I'm laying this adjacent to the wood. And you can do this without the clamps. Oh, boy. There's no bottom to this. The apron on this is thick and, yeah. Come on. Okay, so what you want to do, if you could see this from the top, you're basically putting the plane against the veneer before the blade, and you're just looking down from the top, and you're going across, and as you go across, like you do with any hand plane, you transfer the weight from the front to the back, and you're getting these little shavings off. And you want to do that until you get shavings from both of the now there are lots of, this is what you're getting. So you're looking to get an entire length, but it's hard to tell when you do. You can more hear it than anything else. And when you're doing two, it's best to just overdo. You'll see a lot of discussions on YouTube about doing this with routers and table saws and all sorts of stuff. This couldn't be simpler. I mean, you know. So I wasn't using this as a guide. I'm simply holding down the veneer with this. The veneer is sticking out ever so slightly. Like, I don't know, 32nd. And now, when you take this and you put these together, you get a seamless joint. I mean, it is, you'll see it better when we glue it down, because we'll do a butt joint here, okay? So this is an important technique, this using a hand plane to true up veneer, because we're going to use that same technique to make stringing and cross banding and everything else. So it's one of the benefits of learning a method, you know, using a hand plane, because you can apply it to quite a few different. All right, so this is pretty cool. I would normally okay, So you'll notice that I turned this knob way to the left. I had it all the way to the right because I'm taking the glue up, and I don't really care if I scorch the glue because I was reversing it, I was getting stuff off. When you're doing this to veneer down stuff, you don't want the glue to get above 140 degrees. So if you put it on and the steam coming off, and just wait to turn it. And if you go out and buy a fancy new iron, all those safety features really screw this process up, because when you leave it like this for 2 minutes, it turns itself off. So I have a very fancy iron in my workshop that's full of glue on the bottom of it because it was too cold when I put it down. It was just, so if you go to a used shop and, okay, so the first solution, or the first process is to use your hammer. So this is the hammer I use. I made it. Most people do make their own. Most people put brass in here. I use HDMI plastic. It's much easier to machine than brass, and glue doesn't stick to it. So, it's great. This is my first veneer hammer when I wasn't sure if I was really going to do this. This is a piece of floor from Lumber Liquidators made out of their South American mystery wood. It's very, very hard. I even left a little floor thingy on there, and I used it for about 5 years. It works great. So, you don't need to, you can make a veneer hammer like this. That's all you're doing. It's a squeegee, it's not a hammer. All right, so, where's my water? Okay, here. So you would normally have a pot of hot water, and you pretty much want to wet your substrate. And you want to wet, I'm going to put this down this way because I don't want the edges sticking up. I want the edges going down because it's curved this way. Although it really won't matter in the long run, but this is just a little easier. So what you want to do is wet the top. The traditional method is you would paint the top with hide glue, okay? If you do that, you're not going to be able to use your hammer, your iron. So by doing it this way, if you don't get the thing down right away, you have lots of opportunity to fix it with the iron, okay? I'm even going to wet the inside because I don't want the glue draining into this thing. And now we're going to actually hide glue something here. All right. So I'm going to paint the glue on. And I can also see this is thicker than I would want it to be. But we'll make it work.
Is that because there's not enough water, or it's not?
It's been cooking for 2 hours. You can see the glue squeezing out the edge, and that's exactly what you want. So glue is not squeezing out down here, which means this thing gelled up, and it's because this is cold, the room is cold, and I didn't heat up the, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the iron and very lightly keep it moving over the surface. And it's starting to squeeze out. All right, so that is down. So theoretically, I shouldn't have to scrape this off, but this glue is setting so fast. You don't see a tablespoon anywhere, do, oh, here it is, no? Okay, so we're going to do the second one. So this is the top. I have my triangle on it so I can see it. Now, there are some people that only put glue on the substrate and let the glue on the substrate percolate up to the glue on the veneer, and I'm not a big fan of that. So as you're hammering this, you kind of push it towards, without trying to stretch the veneer, because you will stretch it.
How wide is your veneer hammer, roughly? 2 inches?
About 3 inches. Yeah. I made, the first one I made, I took some measurements off the internet and it was like that, and I didn't like it. So
Too wide?
Yeah, too wide.
Okay.
So you see, this is coming up here. So we'll just kind of heat this up a little bit. So that's down. And if I was overlapping these, I would take that straight edge, put it in the middle, pull it down, take the top piece off, put the iron on there, so I can get the piece that's wedged under there and just pull it out. But that's, so now if I was making a tabletop out of this, I would take this and I would connect it. I don't see my pencil lines anymore, but let's assume there was a pencil line there and there. Now, this is a little easier to cut because it's wet. And then you just lift this off. And you got your edge ready for your stringing that you would want to, and you just do that all around. And then put your stringing on it. Okay? I'm sorry, you guys are... Now, nothing says this has to be a straight line. Like, suppose you're looking at this and say, you know what this really needs? It needs a piece of walnut going across this. So you would simply get a piece of walnut bigger than this, lay it down on there, maybe even lightly tack it down with hide glue, cut it, move it, cut it, lift the whole thing up, get rid of the substrate, put the walnut down, and now you have a tabletop with a walnut stripe going across, you know.
Could you stack the walnut preemptively?
Sure. Yeah. The nice thing about this is you're building it from the inside out. So, and anything you do that you don't like, do it again. You know, if you don't like this joint, take it up, okay? You don't have to throw away the veneer, just give it a new edge and slide it back in place again, okay?
Jim?
Yeah.
Jim, would you ever, if you're doing a decorative, thanks.
Hey, Jim, if you were doing a decorative pattern that was more complex, would you ever use veneer tape to put pieces together first, or would you always just build from the inside out?
No, I go from the inside out. Let's go back to Fred. In his book says, with hammer veneering, I could hammer the world. Okay? Well, imagine this board is 40 feet long, and you just keep doing this over and over and over again. You don't need a vacuum, you don't need to go out and buy a 40-foot vacuum bag, okay? You use the same hammer, the same hide glue, you make it as big as you want. Okay, so the other way of doing veneer is with the mechanical press. These battens have a slight taper built into them so that they squeeze down from the middle out. So when I'm doing that, I use liquid hide glue. You know, if I have something that crotches are really hard to hammer veneer. So when it comes to crotches, I'll do a mechanical press with liquid hide glue. When I'm doing regular veneers or decorative veneering, any decorative veneering, I use a hammer. Next.
Is that because the crotches fall apart, Jim?
Pardon me?
Is that because the crotches crumble, kind of, if you work them? Why the crotch veneer?
Well, the real issue is you've got some long grain, then a lot of end grain, long grain, end grain. And when you hammer it, the end grain, it'll stretch. So when it's drying, it'll start to shrink again, so it's really hard to keep those seams. So with the crotch veneer, I'll shoot the edges just like I showed you. I'll tape them. Then I'll apply the liquid hide glue and put it in a press, and that way I know what it's going to be. Okay. This is the process I just showed you. Next slide. Toothing. So when you start reading about this stuff, to say, well, you got to tooth your surface. You got to tooth your surface, you got to tooth your veneer, because everybody always tooth it. And it's nonsense. It's just not true, okay? But everybody says it. Here are the facts about toothing. They say, well, if you pick up all the veneers, period veneers, they were toothed underneath it, and the veneer was toothed. And it was, that's true. But the reason they toothed it was everything they were working with was hand-sawn veneers and hand-sawn tabletops. And the purpose of a toothing plane is to true a surface. That's what it's there for. So what they were really doing was truing the surface so they could lay the veneer down. Now, the people justified it after that by saying, well, you need to rough the surface up so it improves the grip. Hide glue forms a chemical bond, not a mechanical bond. So much for that theory. So, you know, if you really feel like some other guy that's, you know, a blogger that wrote it is right, I'm going to tooth my surfaces, I'd like you to explain to me how you're going to tooth a 40th of an inch thick piece of veneer, okay? I'd like to be in the room when you do it, okay? But this is my toothing plane, and I use it to true the curly maple and things like that. So you can pass this around. I bought that in Lift Free or Die tool auction, and the plain body was a train wreck. It was split and rotted, had rot in it. It was awful. And the guy was selling it for next to nothing. It was like $18. I only wanted the blade. That's, I know how to make a body. I didn't know how to make the blade. So, next. Okay, so this is an example. The examples I'm showing you are federal pieces of furniture, but these techniques apply to any piece of furniture that you're going to put veneer on or you use hide glue on. Next. So in this particular piece, I'm sure you've all seen the mountain of tape it takes to put one of these things together and put it in glue. This entire thing took 40 minutes to veneer down. 40. And done, okay? So this is all done with hide glue, hammered down. This edging is cross-banded mahogany, hammered down. Took maybe 10 minutes to do the whole circumference. This barber pole are individual pieces that are rubbed in. So I know people do these things in vacuum bags, with PVA glue. So there's no magic, hide glue, PVA glue, whatever strikes you. I know you can get this edge banding on if you're really creative using PVA glue. I have no idea how you would do that barber pole banding with anything but hide glue at all. Next. So this was a timbre. We're going to talk about this piece because this front is a timbre. You can see it opens up. So I used hide glue on the timbres because I added glycerin to the hide glue. You buy it in a drugstore, okay? Just add a little glycerin, and it keeps the canvas in the back, or I think I use the linen on this, keeps it nice and flexible. The sides of this are hand-sawn veneers. So I made this entire piece out of one piece of wood. So, and I do that with all my tables so that there's no issue with grain colors and whatnot. Stringing and cross-banding and inlays were installed. This top and the front, all this stuff was done with hide glue. The top is hammer veneered. The drawer embellishments and cock beading are installed. Oh, wow. Keep going. Keep going. This is the cross-banding, and you can see you can get it around there. Next. Okay, we're going to do part of this drawer. So this drawer basically has a center field, a holly, cross-banding, and cock beading. Okay? And I'm going to see if we can do that in 16 minutes. This is a drawer front, okay? And this is the cross-banding, and I cut this out. So if I put this on here, and this broke off, okay? Tragedy, but don't worry about it. I'm going to put the stringing there. So I want my field to end here, okay? So I would go around, first of all, I would make this drawer bigger than it wanted to be, but that's not exactly true. If this is an inset drawer, I would make it exactly to the opening. But when I put the cock beading on it, the cock beading would be inset from the edges, so you want the drawer to be able to fit in the opening. So it's not like you make a drawer and then put cock beading all around the outside. That's not how it's done. So I know that this center field has to end here and here and here and here because I laid this out already, I think. All right, so the thing I wanted to show you, that's how you lay it out. Now I want to put down veneer that is bigger than that. So I took this piece of poplar, and rather than simply make it nice and straight across, I said, oh, let's make something interesting, okay? So I simply took poplar, turned it, and how I did that, so whenever I'm book matching anything, I make a, say I was doing the whole drawer, which I've lost here. So I make a template out of paper that's exactly the size of the drawer, okay? And I mark a center line on it. And then I take the veneer that I want to use for example, a piece of poplar. And I put the template down on it, and I look at it. And I say, well, that's interesting. And then I slide it around and say, well, that's interesting. And then I slide it like this and say, well, that's a little more interesting, but I wonder what it'll look like book matched. So if you take a mirror and you put it down on the center line of the drawer, you'll be able to see exactly what this thing is going to, can you see it? I can't tell you.
Right there.
Yeah, okay? And if I don't like that, then I can turn this a little more like that, or I can turn it like so, and get a very different look. Or if I wanted the center of this to be at the top, I can put this here, and then you get a V-shaped, you can't see it right there, you get a V-shaped look. If you take something interesting, like this piece of walnut, because when you do this, you need two pieces of veneer stacked on top of one another, so they're out of a flitch. So you see this piece has this little figure here. So if you put that down, and you put your template on top of it, if you're kind of curious as exactly where should I be book matching these, you put this down, and you get this really wide opening. If you take this and move it this way, you get a smaller, more focused one. So if you're thinking about...
It's over here, Jim.
I can turn it this way.
Right there.
Okay? So I can move it back and get a, no, you're not really seeing that. But you get the idea. So I can turn it in and out. I can turn it sideways. If I turn it sideways, you get some really interesting effects. You get the grain going down the side. You can't get it.
There it is.
You got the grain going diagonally, and you got the centerpiece is almost like a triangle in the middle, and depending on how you want to do your drawer pull, you can get some interesting stuff. So if you take this piece of curly maple, you know, everybody would say, oh, look at this curly maple section, I'm just going to do that. But if you really look at including some of the yeah, you really can't see it on that. If you include some of this figure, and particularly if you move it in further, you get all this curly maple stuff on the top, and you get a little bit of this figure on the bottom. So if you're going to make a drawer front or anything that's book matched, use the mirror with the drawer. So we're going to make a drawer front here, and we're going to put down the center veneer real fast. You want to put it down so that it's on the center line, but it's overlapping where you want to have the would normally wait a couple of minutes on this before I did it any further, but we're running out of time because somebody let this presenter run off at the mouth, so. We're looking for that person right now, by the way. I'm only going to do one corner of this so you can see, because I want to get to the, I don't even think this is going to be square at this point, but it's good because I wanted to show you that even if these things aren't square, the miters are going to be fine. Okay, so imagine I did that on all four corners, okay? And you scrape off the glue.
I found this on the web.
Oh, really? And you take your stringing, and you push it in place. And you take your second piece of stringing, now I use an old plane blade. Oh, I put this on the wrong side. So I'd let this set for a couple of minutes, but basically, you take your plane blade. Now, if you, normally the edges are all the same distance, so it's a 45-degree angle. But even if they aren't, suppose you said, I really want to have a really wide side and a very narrow bottom, you simply take your chisel, you put it in the corner where the two pieces of holly are, and let the chisel fall on the other corner, and just lean down on it. And then you pull these pieces out, and you have a perfect miter with your holly, okay? Then we want to take the cross banding, and normally I'd be, oh, I have a piece of chalk on here. When you're cutting a cross banding, cut them all the same way because the chatoyance becomes a real problem. This is normally highly figured wood. So it doesn't matter whether you put the chalk mark in or out or up or down, just put it the same way every time. I like to put it in and up so I can see it. So I'm just going to break this, and you want highly figured wood for this, and I would normally wet this and, you know, but we're just going to move along briskly here. So I put down some glue, put some glue on this thing. I'm going to lay this as way too much glue, because I just let so much glue, I just lifted up the string. The next time you have a presentation, make sure the guy doesn't talk so much. Okay, so I have that piece of cross banding down, okay? Now I'm going to take this piece, put it here, way too much glue. This is where having a little tiny glue brush pays. So you just got to make sure it sticks out past the edge, okay? And now I take my chisel put it in the corner. Lift this up, pull this piece out from underneath, press this down, and you have... Now, to make the rest of this, the reason I said I wasn't concerned when this was breaking off is you simply, if you're continuing this, you overlap the two, and it's a very strong grain going this way. So you overlap the two, chop down between them, lift it out, and you just walk your way around. So a top like this is not going to take you more than 15 minutes to make. And if you were going to make this in a vacuum press and you were going to tape all this stuff and then put it in and then find out that it slipped just a little bit when you put it into the press, I take a pencil and I draw a line across the top of this so that as these things come off, I know which side has the taper on it. So when I put it down, I turn it upside down so that the top of the V is it. So, and you're talking about, a really small taper here. So, but it's mental hygiene. If you're really that concerned, do it. The glue's going to fill the gap. By the time you scrape it and fill it, and particularly if you're using grain filler, like and the way to do the cross banding is exactly the same way. So if I want a 3/4 of an inch cross banding, I put the 3/4 inch side down. I would have shot this edge, by the way. And I showed you how to do that. Put this in, slide this up, take this away, cut it, put your chalk mark on it first, okay? And then you wind up with your cross banding, okay?
How would they do all this back in the period when they didn't have these kind of veneers at, 1/42 of an inch?
Well, I think they would have used a similar technique to cut the width. Yeah. But there are also, when you're using solid veneers, it's a completely different story. You use tools like this and this to thickness them with a taper, and there's another one in here somewhere. Anyway, working with solid inlays and stringing is a completely different technique. I'd be happy to come back and talk about that sometime if that's of interest to people. But they're all shop-made tools, but So let's get to the banding. So what is cock beading? Cock beading basically, can you put the pictures of this? So when you're veneering a draw face, the edges are a high risk because it's all exposed veneer, particularly the end grain, and you need to protect it. So this wood here, this rounded piece of wood is called cock beading, and in Chippendale furniture, it's very frequent to see this cock beading applied to the case, and the drawer fits inside that cock beading. In Federal furniture, it's applied to the drawer because it's protecting the veneer. So to make cock beading, if you watch a video on somebody apply cock beading, it's like torture. I mean, the wood is sliding around and the PVA glue, and it's never in the right place, and they're using chop saws and all sorts of stuff. It's just a nightmare. So with hide glue, it becomes a lot simpler. So the cock beading on Thompson furniture is 5/32 of an inch in diameter, thickness. And I know that because Alan Breed said so. And Alan Breed knows everything there is to know about Goddard and Thompson furniture. So the easiest way to make cock bead is to make yourself a piece of wood that's 5/32 of an inch thick and wide, wider than you want. And get yourself an old saw blade like this. And sorry about that. It's a chainsaw file. You get a 5/32 chainsaw file and cut a track in here. And you polish both faces. And before you cut the semicircular section in there, what I do is I roll these edges like a scraper, okay? Which has nothing to do with making the cock bead, but it comes in helpful later on, okay? So then you just take your material, you put it in something, you take a pencil and you mark the top. I'm not going to do this whole thing. You mark the top because you need to know when you're finished. So when that pencil line goes away, you know that you've made your cock bead. So you just start to pull, put it between your two fingers, pull. So I just did 4 inches, a couple of seconds, so you do the math, a couple of minutes to make enough for a table. So sometimes when you're doing this, you leave a little mark, an edge on this thing. It doesn't completely form over as to a circle, and that's where the scraper thing comes in. So if you just kind of take the scraper now and tune up those edges, you've got cock bead that goes around. So the next part of that is, all right, I got cock bead, but how do I make this fit so perfectly around? So let's suppose you took, here's your cock beading, and you have the side of your drawer, and you put a knife line on either edge of where you want the drawer to be. And I need to put a miter going this way on this thing. So I could put it in something like this, which is nothing more than a little miter box. And I do that about a 1/16 of an inch away from the knife line, okay? So that's one way to cut the miter. Another way to cut the miter is to simply, if you look at your saw, you can see the reflection, okay, in the saw. So if I turn it so it looks like 90 degrees, okay? So I'm going to put it in, I'm going to look at that, the light is not good in here. So I put it in here, I look for the angle, and that looks like it's about 90 degrees to me. And keep in mind, you're not using this angle because you're going to be planing down to the surface. But if you look, you can see it's pretty close.
Nuts.
Okay? And so you don't need a miter box, you just need to look at it. Then you want to take this little donkey, now this is a baby donkey. My regular one is like this big, and I use a jack plane on it. But the benefit of this donkey as opposed to a regular shooting board is that this material has a rounded edge. So if I'm trying to plane an angle that goes into that rounded edge, I'm going to blow out the edge, okay? With a piece like this donkey type thing, if the edge is like this, here's the rounded part, and I need to plane this way, I simply put it on this side of the donkey and pull the plane blade this way. And if I'm going the other way, I simply put it down here, but you always want to go into the edge. And you would do this until you hit the knife line. Okay? Now, to start, you'd make a small piece with two mitered on both sides. You make your first piece to go across the drawer face, wherever the drawer face went. Oh, yeah. So you'd make your first piece to go across here, but longer than necessary. You make your first joint, and then you take your scrap piece, and you put it up against here, and then use that to mark the knife line, okay? Then you miter that edge, put this down, hold that in place, bring it over here, and keep testing until you get it right. Slop some hide glue on both of them, rub it back and forth, hold your test piece in place so the miter fits, and the first piece is down, no screws, no clamps, no brads, no nothing. And you walk your way around until you're done, okay?
And how do you clamp it to the, I'm sorry, I missed it. How do you clamp it to the edge?
You don't, it's a rub joint.
Rub track, okay.
Okay? And that's how that's how that drawer front was done. I wanted to actually do the whole drawer front, but Jeff asked too many questions.
So you have plywood as a substrate there? Jim, would you?
I just happened to have a piece of scrap.
Rather have India?
No, I'd probably use wood. If you, for a drawer, no, because I'm going to miter the edge, I'm going to be dovetailing the edges. So for example, on this brick thing, say I was bricking the drawer, and you can do this, I can veneer this just as easily as this flat piece. But what I would do with this drawer is, these bricks might be not as high, but this brick, this half brick, and this brick be cherry. So that when I'm looking at the drawer from the side with dovetails, I'm looking at a cherry drawer, okay? This brick, and this brick, cherry. This gonna have cockbeat on it. This is gonna have cockbeat on it. So anybody looking at this drawer, and I'd slop a cherry veneer on the inside of it. Looking at this drawer, there's no way to tell that's not solid cherry.
And you do the inside fairing with the compass plane?
I would, yeah. But, the router thing works. The problem with the router thing is half of this wood is going against the grain to a router, okay? That's also true for the hand plane, but I can set that plane blade to a very high angle, and, I didn't get any tear out on this at all. And this was done with the hand plane. So you plane from the center down and the center down. You don't go like that.
Jim, any extra tricks to veneering on a curve, or it's all the same?
Exact same thing. The only difference is when I laid that straight edge down, to take this off, I can't do that here. So I use a marking gauge, which is somewhere. I use a marking gauge with a cutter in it. So I just go across this way. But I still use a tri-square or something, plastic tri-square to do the edges. But this will take the sides off just fine. I guess if you had a flexible straight edge, you could do that too, but this stuff is wet. You know, it's going to cut easy. I would let it sit longer than I did. I mean, I really went way too fast on that. But you can see that I got a center field down. It's book matched. It's got a holly, like if this was walnut, the holly would look better. And I got this cross banding, and it miters up perfectly.
Can you hold this one?
I'm sorry. And I got the center field, the stringing, the cross banding, and the miters.
Put feet onto the edge of that so we can all see it completely.
Okay?
And how would you do the curve on the curve?
That takes, you have, what I did when I was doing a draw like that, you lay it down, you give yourself however much, 5-30 seconds that you want it to stick out, you simply draw that line, you bandsaw close and then fair it with a plane and, you know.
Okay.
In sections?
No, I did the whole thing at once.
Single piece?
See, this stuff gets you, you have the 6-foot rule, the 6-yard rule and the 6-inch rule. This is like the 6-millimeter rule. When you lay out a jaw like that, the first thing the woodworker is going to be doing is looking at every one of the miter corners and, so you really want it to be dead on. Are there any other questions?
One last one, Jim. When you're doing the copying on a drawer, you have to have the case size the drawer front minus the thickness of the cock beading.
No.
So it isn't too wide.
No. What I do is I fit the drawer front to the case. So even if the case is a little off, my drawer front's going to be a little off. It's going to fit properly in the opening. I then lay down the veneer, so the veneer is going to be 5/32 of an inch bigger than it needs to be because it's going to the edge. Then I'll use a table saw or a knife and a rabbet plane or something to take off that 5/32 of an inch. Like when I'm doing, I wish I had a chart, but when I'm doing dovetails, for instance, one of the issues with the period pieces is the edge the edge of the cock beading, the stuff on this side, is nailed on because it's all end grain. Okay, so what I do is I make the tails for the dovetails come really close to the front, and then I cut some of that 5/32 of an inch into those dovetails, so I'm getting long grain to long grain on this when I put it on, so I don't need pins or tacks or anything else to hold that in place, just the rub joint. So basically you have the drawer, you cut away 5/32 of an inch after the veneer is down, then you apply the cock beading, and the cock beading and the drawer now fit into the opening.
Oh, okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim.